All right, good afternoon. I will start off with a statement on the issue of migrants and refugee children. As a matter of principle, the Secretary General believes that refugee and migrants should always be treated with dignity and with respect, and in accordance with existing international laws. Children must not be traumatized by being separated from their parents. Family unity must be preserved. And that statement is available online. The Secretary General is today in Helsinki, where he attended the second meeting of his high-level advisory board on mediation. He then took part in the Kultaranta talks, an annual debate on foreign and security policy, and also met with the President of Finland. The Secretary General should be traveling off to Oslo from Helsinki very shortly. And over the weekend, you will have seen we issued two statements, one in which the Secretary General welcomed the Afghan government's announcement of the extension of the unilateral ceasefire with the Taliban and urged the Taliban to heed the call for peace from the Afghan people and also extend the ceasefire. He urged the parties not to allow for those who try to derail peace efforts to prevail and condemned the attacks in the eastern province of Nangarhar that targeted Eid celebrations. And in Nigeria, we issued a statement in which the Secretary General condemned an attack by suspected Boko Haram insurgents targeting Eid celebrations in the Damboa local government area of Borno State. The Secretary General called for those responsible for this attack to be swiftly brought to justice. And yesterday, in a tweet, the Secretary General warmly commended the Prime Minister Tsipras and Zaev for their role in the historic agreement signed on the shores of Lake Prespa that border Greece and the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. The Secretary General encouraged the two governments to maintain their strong commitment to ratification and implementation. He noted that the United Nations is committed to supporting these efforts. The Undersecretary General for Political Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, took part in the signing ceremony. The resolution of this long-standing dispute gives us hope. It reminds us that it is indeed possible to find solutions to the most intractable issues through dialogue and compromise, she said. And also wanted to flag that here, Maria-Luisa Ribeiro-Viotti, the chef de cabinet, read out a message on the Secretary General's behalf to the third review conference on the Program of Action of Small Arms, telling delegates that every year over 500,000 people are killed violently around the world, mostly through small arms fire. She said that illicit arms are also used against the UN peacekeeping forces. In 2017, 56 peacekeepers died in violent attacks, the highest number in 2 decades. Controlling and regulating small arms requires actions that go well beyond national security institutions. She said it also includes providing alternative livelihoods for former combatants, engaging with municipal governments and police, working with civil society, including grassroots organizations and community violence reduction programs, as well as local businesses. And that statement is available online. And an update from Yemen, where I can tell you that the Special Envoy for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, will brief the Security Council by video conference this afternoon to present elements that he has been discussing with his interlocutors in the past months, which we hope would allow for resumption of negotiations. The Special Envoy is just in Sana'a to work out an agreement for HODEIDAH. He will be discussing the results of these discussions with the coalitions for the next few days. And that briefing will be held in close consultations, and Mark Lowcock, the humanitarian coordinator, will also be briefing the Security Council in close consultations. On the ground, we can report that fierce fighting has continued in HODEIDAH today. About 5,200 families have fled the fighting to seek safety within their own districts or in other districts in HODEIDAH Governorate. That number is expected to increase as hostilities continue. Agencies have pre-positioned 63,000 metric tons of food, tens of thousands of emergency kits and nutrition supplies, as well as over 1 million liters of fuel. Medical teams have been dispatched and humanitarian service points established across HODEIDAH, including in the city. Distribution of emergency kits began last week and is continuing. And I also want to flag that the second UN Chiefs of Police Summit will take place here on the 20th and 21st of June. It brings together ministers, chiefs of police, gendarmerie, and police representatives from up to 193 countries who will chart a vision for UN police and illicit commitments to strengthen its ability to effectively prevent and address security threats before they transcend borders. Building on ongoing reform and the Secretary General's action for peacekeeping initiative, the summit takes stock of UN policing efforts, including what it takes for UN police to perform effectively and realize the Secretary General's vision of a transformed UN police that is people-centered, mission-oriented, modern, agile, and flexible, and specialized and rights-based. And on a related note, I will be joined after the briefing by Luis Carrillo, the UN police advisor, along with the police commissioner of the UN mission in South Sudan and the police commissioner of the UN multidimensional integrated stabilization mission in Mali, MINUSMA. They will both be here. All three of them will hear a brief view ahead of the police summit. And in Geneva, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein, gave his last global updates on human rights in a Human Rights Council to a regular session this morning. He said that historically the most destructive force to imperil the world has been chauvinistic nationalism when raised to feral extremes by self-serving, careless, and amplified leaders and amplified by mass ideologies which themselves repress freedom. As an attack on the multilateral system and its rules intensifies, he added, so will the risk increase of further mischief on a grander scale. The High Commissioner appealed to the Council to do more, to speak louder and work harder for the common purpose and for universal human rights law to better our chances for global peace. When leaders undermine human rights and human rights law, this is in no way an act of patriotism, he said. They are eroding the structures which can ensure the safety of their people. True patriotism consists in viewing every state and humanity as a whole as a community of mutual responsibility with shared needs and goals, the High Commissioner said, and his full speech is available to you. And we want to congratulate our friends at UNICEF who have received the EDGE certification, becoming the first UN agency to earn the leading global assessment methodology and business certification standard for gender equality. The economic dividends of gender equality, or EDGE, certification process includes a comprehensive review of data of policies and practices and analysis of an organization-wide survey of staff's experience and perception of gender equality in the workplace. UNICEF's executive director, Henrietta Fore, stressed that children's rights and well-being are achieved when women's rights are upheld and preserved. To be leading an organization for the rights of all children and young people, include young women and girls, we have to lead by example, she said. Press briefings tomorrow. There'll be a briefing here by the UN Office of Disarmament Affairs with Ambassador Jean-Claude Brunet, the president of the Third Review Conference of the Program of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons, also known as RevCon 3 in UN terms, and Izumi Nakamitsu, the High Representative for Disarmament Affairs. They will be here to brief you on the review progress made at the implementation of the Program of Action on Small Arms and Light Weapons and its international tracing instrument. That's at 11 a.m. here. And tomorrow is also the International Day for the Elimination of Sexual Violence in Conflict. And at noon, I will be joined by Pramila Patten, the Special Representative, Secretary General on Sexual Violence in Conflict. She will brief you on the subject. And at 1 p.m., there'll be a briefing by Nanette Kelly, the High Commissioner, the Director of the New York Office of UNHCR, and she'll brief you ahead of UNHCR's Global Trends report. Halas. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Stéphane. I have two questions. First one is about Syria, about the humanitarian. Particularly, there are reports that nearly 200,000 IDPs are reportedly besieged in the Shahban area near Afrin without food or medical assistance. Do you have any updates about that? I think I asked about this last week.
I don't have any updates for that because, as you know, we are not present in the area with the most humanitarian needs within Afrin district. We're getting some updates from people who have moved out and have gone out, but we have no specific update on that. Your second question.
Can you ask your OCHA colleagues to get us if they could send them any aids?
We ask, and as soon as we have something, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. And about the second question is about Iraq. Following the decision of the Iraqi parliament to recount the votes manually of the Iraqi latest parliamentary election that was hailed as successful by the UN and the members of the Security Council, things are really heating up in Iraq, and to the point that there are threats of the use of force. And what does the Secretary General thinks about all this?
The Secretary General trusts that Iraq will complete the electoral process in accordance with the Constitution and the relevant laws and procedures stipulated by Iraq's sovereign institutions. The UN continues to provide electoral advice and assistance to Iraq in accordance with the mandate. I mean, as anywhere, you can have elections. In most countries, there are procedures to appeal and to do recounts. We just want to make sure that whatever procedure is followed is done in accordance with the Constitution and existing laws.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did the Secretary General have the chance to speak to Ambassador Haley or to anybody in the American administration about the zero tolerance policy, which have now resulted in the separation of at least 2,000 kids from their parents who crossed illegally into the U.S. soil? Or does he intend to do so in his...
I have no context that I'm able to report. I think the statement that I read out clearly outlines the Secretary General's position. Nada.
On Yemen, does the special envoy want anything in particular from the Security Council? It's been really since the beginning of this conflict that there's been a resolution. Would he like more support from the Council? Or can you give us an update on what he may say today?
The talks, he's involved in very intensive talks currently in Sana'a. He will also be talking to various coalition partners. It will be important that whatever he comes up with be strongly backed by the Security Council. It is important that the Security Council speaks with one voice when supporting the efforts of the special envoy to bring the parties back to a political settlement and to end the conflict in Yemen. We'll see. We'll see if the Council President comes out, and we'll see whatever we can share from our end. Olga.
Thanks, Steph. Do you have the understanding on the situation in Syria and Manbij after Turkish authorities said the Turkish army is now in there?
No, I don't have a first-hand update. Matthew.
Some other things, but I wanted to ask you, first, two things. One, will you provide a readout of the meeting of the Secretary General with Jared Kushner and Jason Greenblatt? And also, will you confirm and to some degree read out or explain the lack of a readout of what appears to have been a contact, as you said, between Secretary General Nikki Haley and other P5 ambassadors on Thursday, June 14th? What was the topic and what was
I have no, the Secretary General regularly meets with the P5. I have nothing further to say. The meeting, there was a meeting that took place at the residence on Saturday with Ambassador Haley and Mr. Greenblatt and Mr. Kushner. They discussed the situation, the Middle East peace process, the humanitarian situation in Gaza, and recent UN developments that took place here in connection with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
So the two votes. That's what I was going to ask you about, because the White House did put out a readout, and I guess I'm just wondering, what is the standard for you guys putting out a readout? It seems like at least the second of those was not just with ambassadors. It's a pretty high-profile meeting.
I understand. We've people were asked us questions. We responded to those questions. Masoud and then Joe.
Thank you, Stéphane. Has the Secretary General managed to have any talks with the Indian government or the Indian Prime Minister on the human rights violation reported by the United Nations? What do you call it?
No, there's been no contact that I'm aware of.
Had no contact at all?
There's no contact that I'm aware of.
They are human rights violation.
Uh,
He doesn't bother to call them?
I think the report put out by the High Commissioner for Human Rights speaks for itself. Mr. Klein.
Yes, I know you read out the brief statement at the outset about the Secretary General's views on separation of parents and children. Is he also concerned about the zero tolerance policy in general? In other words, the prosecution of all individuals caught crossing the border illegally? And secondly, would he have any comment if the families intact, parent and children, were immediately deported upon being apprehended?
I'm not going to get into hypotheticals. What the Secretary General would like to see at all borders is to see people being treated with dignity and respect for their rights, that people claiming asylum be given proper hearings. This is not a position that he has specifically vis-a-vis the United States. This is a principled position that he has for the way that migrants and refugees are treated the world over.
My question is regarding the Secretary General's statement you read out about welcoming the ceasefire by the Afghan government. But you know that the Taliban have rejected any extension of the ceasefire. Do you have anything to comment on that?
No, we're obviously disappointed that they have not accepted the government's offer of continued ceasefire. We think the people of Afghanistan are deserving of peace and of reconciliation. Madam, sorry to keep you waiting.
So no problem. Thanks. Going back to the SG's meeting with the Americans on Saturday, was the issue of migrants brought up or any of the other concerns he has?
This meeting took place at the request of Mr. Kushner and Mr. Greenblatt, and it was focused on the Middle East peace process.
Only?
That's what it was focused on, yeah. Mr. Lee.
Sure. I wanted to ask you, in Togo today, there's a Ville Morte, stay home protest, and people are continuing to protest the 50-year rule of one family and 1 2-year term limits. I'm wondering, I know Mr. Chambas had gone there at one point. What is the UN's involvement? And do they think that the concerns raised by the opposition have been addressed by this 50-year family?
I'm not aware of any direct UN involvement, but I will check. We believe that people have a right to demonstrate peacefully and freely to express their opinion. Linda.
Thank you, Steph. Regarding the meeting on Saturday, you mentioned a lot of it had to do with the Middle East, but I was wondering, has the SG been in touch with the Americans, Chinese, South Koreans, North Koreans regarding the follow-up to the summit?
There's nothing I'm able to share with you at this point on that. Mr. Lee.
Sure. In Libya, there's a lot of fighting in the oil crescent, and it seems that some large oil facilities are on fire in Ras Lanouf. So I'm wondering, given Mr. Salameh, seems like it's both an environmental as well as a political, pretty much of a crisis. What's the UN system doing about these burning oil?
I did not get an update from Libya today.
And on the election in Colombia of Mr. Duque, are there any sort of plans? One, has the Secretary General reached out to congratulate him? And two, are there any thoughts of the UN of how well this will impact either the FARC peace deal or the UN mission there?
We, first of all, commend the people and the authorities of Colombia for the conclusion on Sunday of a cycle of legislative and presidential elections this year that were the most peaceful in decades in Colombia. The ability of Colombians to vote through the country without restriction and in record numbers is a remarkable achievement of the peace process. The Secretary General welcomes President-elect Ivan Duque's early calls for healing the divisions among Colombians, and he wishes him success in this crucial task. As the government transition now gets underway, the Secretary General confirms the strong commitment of the United Nations to accompany Colombia's governments and people in consolidating the hard-won gains of peace and achieving reconciliation after so many years of conflict. Joe, and then we'll go to the back.
Yeah, going back again to the statement you read out in the beginning of your briefing, You said in response to my previous question that the Secretary General wasn't singling out the United States in that statement. But what prompted him to issue that at this time? I mean, if that's just a general statement of principles, it could have been.
It's a general
issued
statement that
anytime.
I mean I think we've all been following what's going on at the border, and I think he is as concerned as anyone else. But it is a statement of principle. Yep.
As you know, Reuters released the news about the Secretary General's report on 2231. Could you
which one? Sorry, on which on? Yeah. Sorry. Yes, I know which one.
2231.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you explain his view about the Trump decision to withdraw the JCPOA as part of this resolution?
The report apparently was leaked. I have no comment on the content of the report, which will be made public soon. As far as the Secretary General's position on the JCPOA, his position is unchanged, that he believes that the JCPOA was a very important achievement and everything should be done to try to preserve its gains.
Has he confirmed the withdrawal of the JCPOA is a violation of 2231?
I think I will encourage you to wait for the report if that is in fact covered in the report. Yeah.
Stéphane, UN Human Rights Commissioner on Trump border policy said the thought that any state would seek to deter parents by inflicting such abuse on children is unconscionable. Does the Secretary General agree with that statement?
It's not for the Secretary to disagree or agree with the High Commissioner for Human Rights. The High Commissioner for Human Rights has a very important voice, and the Secretary General supports him in using that voice. I will go get our guests. Great, please. You go ahead. I'll stand. Farnas? Great. All right, thank you. As promised, we are joined by Luis Carrillo, who is, as you know, the UN Police Advisor, and with him is also the Police Commissioner of the UN Mission in South Sudan, Unaisi Bolatulu Vuniwaka, and they are here to brief you ahead of the UN Police Conference, which is taking place later this month. Commissioner, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Stéphane. Ladies and gentlemen, it is always a pleasure for me to meet you all. And today we are here to brief you on the UN COPS 2018. That is the second edition of the Top Police Summit here at the United Nations. And, of course, I'm joined, as Stéphane just said, by the Police Commissioner Unaisi Lutu Vunianga, who is the Police Commissioner in South Sudan. On the 21st of June, police executives and international experts from around the world will gather here in New York at United Nations headquarters to articulate a common vision for the United Nations police to effectively meet contemporary challenges. Member states will be asked to nominate their finest police officers and, together with the United Nations, further refine their skills needed to the most effective in today's globalized environment, where threats originating thousands of miles away have a direct impact on the safety and security of all citizens and communities. This is an important meeting because the work they do in the field couldn't be more significant. Today, more than 11,000 police women and men are serving currently under the United Nations flag in 16 peace operations, making United Nations Police the largest, most diverse global police service in the world. These police professionals provide a full range of critical operational and capacity building support to their host state counterparts. UNPOL assists in delivering basic public safety and security whenever requested. United Nations Police also help countries recovering from conflict to rebuild their own law enforcement services and institutions. The police component of the United Nations mission in Liberia contributed to peaceful elections and the transfer of authority in the West African nation by supporting the comprehensive reform of the Liberian National Police and setting Liberia on a positive path for the future. United Nations Police help build operational capacities in places such as Darfur, where we provided 80 training courses to 720 policing volunteers from internally displaced person camps. During the past 12 months, United Nations Police also implemented over 25 awareness-raising seminars and training sessions about sexual and gender-based violence, SGBV, to women in Central African Republic and trained 179 million police counterparts in the investigation of SGBV crimes. United Nations protect and serve, but United Nations Police also build. That's why we need help from our partners. We need member states to support our efforts by providing more police officers and police officers with even more specialized police skills. More female police officers, as well as more resources, are essential so that United Nations Police is able to translate lessons from the field into guidance and to advance the strategic guidance framework for international police peacekeeping, our global doctrinal base to successfully meet contemporary international police peacekeeping demands. The United Nations Police have a key role to play in keeping communities around the world safe and secure, and so do member states. United Nations Police have undergone a dramatic transformation over the last half century. From their first deployment in the United Nations mission in the Congo in 1960 to the advent of complex multidimensional peacekeeping operations in the 90s, to the dynamic full-fledged police service of today. In these complex and unpredictable scenarios, one thing is certain. The United Nations Police will continue to play a major and key role in achieving international peace and security in the years to come. Thank you very much. My colleague and myself, of course, will be able to take questions, if any. Thank you.
Do you have anything to add, or we're
Q&A?
Okay.
If there are.
Matthew?
Sure. Thanks a lot, and thanks for. I'm sorry, they're actually going to be. I prepared about South Sudan, so I'm going to ask you about South Sudan. One is, and you could obviously feel free to, and it's not as in this the big picture that you gave, but I'm still left with a kind of a question about the repatriation of the Ghanaian police from WOW, just to try to close it out, because it seemed that the UN was saying that some number were found to have been engaged in sexual exploitation, and the contingent was withdrawn and sent back to Ghana. And then there were headlines from Ghana saying they're just going about their business. They've been fully reinstated and are back out on patrol. So I wanted to know and I understand there's limitations of what you can do, but what do you expect a PCC country, given the finding of OIOS, to do in this circumstances? Maybe the headline was early and something else is going on. And there's also, I'll have a second question, but I'll wait on this first one while I take a look at it. Please, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. And in terms of the actions that has been undertaken by the police contributing country, and in this particular case, it's the Ghana as a police contributing country. There are already systems and processes in place on how the contributing countries should actually respond, which is in line with the policies and in place in terms of how they deal with their staff or police officers that are deployed to the mission. In that area, United Nations continue to engage with the country, the police contributing country, on actions that they are supposed to take in as far as addressing the issues with their officers in their country. So these are some of the things that will continue to engage from the United Nations to the police contributing country on the actions that they take in order to address for those that were found to be directly implicated in the investigation as a whole.
The other one is actually, it's very specific, and I'm just, I don't want to, I received something which purports to be a complaint filed with Prince Zaid and also Antonio Guterres about a particular DSS, and I don't know if a man named Winston Theophilus Roberts.
I think that would, DSS would be separate from the police components.
Okay, so this is not ringing any bells?
No, it doesn't, unfortunately.
All right. Sir, guys, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, no, it's not on that question, but also just to add further to what Commissioner Unaisi just said, clearly to stress the zero tolerance policy, clearly to stress on sexual exploitation and abuse, clearly to stress the role of the United Nations Police, not only in terms of the United Nations Police by itself, but also our responsibility with the member state, and particularly the member state to lead by example. And of course, all the cases should be properly investigated. There is, of course, as you can understand also, the due process that has to follow, prevention, training, investigation, due process, but also one key part that is, as you can understand, to address the victims. And on that, I can assure you that the United Nations Police, in all the areas, we will continue to do our best, that we are credible every day more. One of the panels in the UN COPS is about accountability and performance. So it's one area that we and the member states take very seriously, and action will always be taken for our credibility and for the service delivery that we provide to the population where we are working. Thank you.